Hi Prakash, Senthil, and Rishik. Okay, I'm waiting for Rishik. Let him join. We'll get started. In the last week, the last session, we discussed about this one, right? The regression assumptions, linearity, homoscedasticity, and multicollinearity, and independence of errors, normality of error distribution. These are the assumptions that we discussed. But here, the one second, just give me a second. Yes, we are going to continue linear regression. Prakash, you sent a message, right? Don't type it anything there. You can probably unmute and talk here, okay? Because I'm getting distracted. One second, let me just. Oh, Prakash, I think I did not admit you, right? So that's the reason why you are not able to hear me. Hope all of you are able to hear me, right? A quick check if you cannot see my screen and if you cannot hear me, please type it in the chat window. I hope all of you are able to hear me and see my screen, right? In case of any issues, just let me know. I don't know how to the enable you to join without my authorization. That's a, somehow if I don't notice it, gone. Fine. In the last weekend, last session, we discussed about linearity, homoscedasticity, all the linear regression related assumptions. So, what is linearity? The linear relationship between both the independent and dependent variable. It should meet that thing. And then the next one is this one, the homoscedasticity. So homoscedasticity, how do we find out? Usually also we can find out in case of the presence of homoscedasticity. How do we find out visually? If you see any funnel kind of pattern in the chart, then you have heteroscedasticity is there in your model. You need to address the heteroscedasticity. And the next one is multicollinearity. So what is multicollinearity? Multicollinearity is collinearity amongst the independent variable itself. There should not be any correlation amongst the independent variable or between the independent variable itself. So what is the effects of multicollinearity and how do we find out the multicollinearity? Using the VIF function, variable inflation factor. You have something called variable inflation factor, using which you can find out or detect the multicollinearity in your linear regression model. Okay, so in the case of ordinary least squares method, which is nothing but the linear regression model, even in the presence of multicollinearity, your linear regression is blue. It is always blue. What do you mean by blue? Any idea what is blue? Blue is nothing but right. It is an acronym for best linear unbiased estimator. Best linear unbiased estimator. Even though the presence of multicollinearity is there, right? So we say in general linear regression is right blue. Blue means best linear unbiased estimator, inconsistent, right? So how do we deduct? Using VIF function, variable inflation factor function, using which we will find out. And what is the effect of multicollinearity? Now the question is, if I have multicollinearity, I know how to find out the multicollinearity. Using VIF function, I can find out. Alternatively, I can use the correlation chart, using which also I can find out. Okay, now I was able to find out there is some kind of multicollinearity. Is there? Yes. Oh, okay. You dropped off from this victory. Okay. Yeah, Prakash, you have some question? Yeah, tell me, what is your question? You raised your hand. Unmute yourself and talk, no? You have any questions? Okay, I did not receive any message also. Okay, fine. Okay, so now we are able to figure it out, the presence of multicollinearity. Fine, what is the next step? How am I going to address it? Right? So the before that, what is the impact if I have multicollinearity in my model? What is going to happen? First of all, before we dive into fixing the issue, right? First, I wanted to know. So, what is going to be the effect? If I have the multicollinearity, what is the effect of that? So, your standard error of the estimates will be, large. The errors will be more. Okay. So, large standard errors mean large confidence intervals, right? Large standard errors mean small observed test statistics, right? So that is the problem. The estimates of standard errors and parameters, right? What do you mean by parameters? The beta coefficients like intercept, slopes, right? These parameters tend to be sensitive to changes in the data, right? So that is the problem with multicollinearity. You need to address multicollinearity. Okay, you have to address the multicollinearity. Now the question is, okay, if there is a moderate correlation between the independent variable, so do I have to still to remove the of the two? Let's say you have two independent variables are there. Those two independent variables are moderately correlated, or the correlation is very weak correlation. There is a correlation, but it is not so strong. Do I still need to drop of those two variables any one of them? Right? So do I need to drop any one of them? If there is a strong correlation exists between two independent variables, yes, you need to remove one of the correlated variables. So what is the other alternatives to deal with multicollinearity related issues? You have something called ridge regression. You have something called ridge regression, right? To solve the multicollinearity issues, you have something called multicollinearity. The principal component analysis and ridge regression. Using these two techniques, we can address the multicollinearity. Supposing I have in my model, let's say I have 100 independent variables are there, or the predictors are there. Both of them are same, right? 100 predictor variables are there, or independent variables are there, out of which 50 variables are correlated. How do I identify? How do I know which independent variables that I need to discard it from my model? How do I know which independent variable that I need to discard from my model? So if you have just two variables, you can find out. Am I audible? Prakash, am I audible? You mentioned that I'm not audible. One second, let me check. Can someone confirm that if I am audible or not? Rishik, am I audible? Am I audible to you all? One second, let me just check here. Am I audible? I'm not able to see the chat window also here. Yeah, it is there now. I can see that you are able to hear. Okay, Prakash, thanks for confirming it. And now again you are saying now able to hear. Thanks, you're audible. Okay, thank you. I'm audible, right? Good. Please unmute yourself and let me know if I'm audible or not, or if I'm not audible, just send a message to my WhatsApp. Fine. So in the presence of homoscedasticity, how we are going to deal with it is, right, especially for example, two scenarios. One is if the number of predictor variables, the independent variables are less. Supposing, let's say you have only two independent variables are there. These two variables are collinear. Using VIF function, you are able to find out there is a multicollinearity in my model. What is the next step? The next step is we need to So we need to we need to think about it, right? Whether the presence of multicollinearity will have any impact on my model or not. What is the effect of that one? So in the case of when it comes to effect, right, when you have the multicollinearity, that means the correlation between or amongst the independent variable itself, the error will be very high, right? And also it can lead to some changes in the parameter values also. What do you mean by parameter? The beta coefficients, the intercept and the slopes. Okay, now right, multicollinearity is there, the effect we know now, but if the correlation between the independent variables or the amongst the independent variables are very strong, then we have to address the issue, right? We have to remove of the two independent variable, we need to remove one of the independent variables. Let's say you have two independent variables A and B, these two are correlated, right? Of these two you have to drop any one of that. So how do you drop that? You need to check of these two independent variables, the correlated independent variables, which independent variable has a strong linear relationship with my dependent variable. That variable you can retain it, right? The other variable you can discard it. In this case, I have only two variables are there. With this, I am able to check of these two collinear variable, which independent variable is linearly correlated well with my dependent variable. Fine. If I have 50 variables are correlated, it is difficult to find out which variables to drop. In that case, we have something called ridge regression. There is something called ridge regression model. All we have to do, just leave it with this algorithm. The algorithm will address the collinear variables automatically. We don't have to do it anything manually. Okay. And apart from this, we have something called principal component analysis, PCA, right? That is another technique that is available to address the multicollinearity issues. And some cases, right, we drop the troublesome variables, right? The variables which causes the collinearity, those kind of things. And the independence of errors. The errors are supposed to be independent. There should not be any correlation, autocorrelation. There should not be any autocorrelation. And normality of error distribution. When you plot all the errors, the shapes should be approximately normally distributed. This is what we discussed in the previous session. Right, for detecting the heteroscedasticity, we use Bruch-Pagan test. Right? If the p-value is greater than alpha, then we fail to reject the null hypothesis, and we are going to conclude the existing model has no heteroscedasticity. That implies that the existing model is adhering to the homoscedasticity assumption, right? Fine. And how to address take the log of the variables to address that, and multicollinearity, how to detect, what is the effect of multicollinearity, how to address them. And we have something called, I told you, we have to use VIF function to detect the multicollinearity amongst the model. Fine. VIF function. What is the formula for VIF? One of my students attended the interview. They've asked him what is the formula for VIF. Variable inflation factor, right? VIF, sorry, this is F. VIF is equal to 1 divided by 1 minus R squared. Right, so this VIFs are automate. It is calculated usually by the software. Right, you can see but here in the case of VIF, right, for the columns, each and every column, the VIF will be calculated. For example, in our case, size and UDS, Spark and MIS, 4 variables were there. So here we found 250, and here we found something like a 2 or 5 or something. Anything above 250, if you can find out in the independent variables column for the VIF functions output, right? That means these variables are correlated. These independent variables are correlated. So this is the formula we are supposed to use, 1 divided by 1 minus R squared, right, using which we can get the variable inflation factor. It ranges from 1. It is starting from 1 to the bigger number. Okay. See, the The VAF tells us the percentage of variance is inflated for each coefficient. The percentage of variance, right? The percentage of variance is inflated for each coefficient. Right, this is the meaning for this. They asked in this question, what is the formula? See, most of the time we depend on the statistical software. See, right, sometimes they want us to know the formula, because when you know the formula, you will be able to understand the underlying principle of this one. Right, so that is the idea of this one. So now you understood the rule of thumb for this one also, right? If it is 1, if it is greater than 5, or if it is greater than 10, it is highly correlated. Yeah, we can say like this, between 1 and 5. Now the question is, okay, my independent variables are correlated. So how do I know whether it is highly correlated and moderately correlated? So between 1 to 5, it is moderately correlated. If it is moderately correlated, then no need to do anything. Okay, you don't have to discard the correlated variable. And if it is greater than 5, usually 10, okay, if it is 10, then you need to address. Infection is there. If the infection is very mild, then we don't need any treatment, isn't it? Similarly, here, yeah, correlation is there, but it is moderate. If it is very high, then only you need to fix that issue, right? So for that, we use PCA, or simple thing is remove one of the core, but it is not as easy as how we think. For that purpose, right, ridge regression, we use something on ridge regression. Probably I need to include ridge regression here. It is not there in my ridge regression model. This model is similar to kind of right linear regression algorithm, but the purpose of ridge regression is it takes care of the collinearity amongst the independent variable. If any of the variables are correlated, right, it automatically, especially when you are working with 15 plus variables or 10 plus independent variables, this is the best way to use it, right? Ridge regression. And on top, PCA is far better to handle the correlated variables. Fine. So next one is we discussed about autocorrelation. Autocorrelation, what test that we are supposed to use? Bruch-Pagan is for identifying the heteroscedasticity, and for autocorrelation we use Durbin-Watson test. If the p-value is less than alpha, we reject the null hypothesis. If it is not, right, then we are going to accept the null hypothesis. And next one is normality of residuals. If the residuals, when you plot the residuals, which is nothing but the errors, it should be normal. It should be like, normal straight line, something like that. Then your model is good. Fine. Next, we'll start with something called bias variance. Okay. What is bias and variance? And cross validation. We'll try to understand these concepts now. We know what is error. What is error? Error is nothing but the difference between the actual value and the predicted value. Actual minus predicted is called error. There are two types of error. One is reducible error and other one is irreducible error. As the name suggests, or as the name says, irreducible error, you cannot reduce the error, right, no matter what you do. In my algorithm, I could see the error is even after I did a lot of tuning, still my model is not, my model's performance is not up to the mark. Right, I'm not able to reduce the error. Right, so this is called irreducible error. Even though you improved your model by addressing noise in your data set and everything, right? Still, your error is you are not able to reduce error some extent. At one point in time, you are not able to reduce the error further. You did a lot of tuning, hyperparameter tuning, and you included various. You reduced some variables, and also you did some kind of feature selection, advanced feature selection. Also used it. Even after that, you were not able to, at one point in time, you decided that you could not reduce an error. You could not reduce the error further. You cannot reduce the error. You cannot reduce your error, further, right? So that is called your irreducible error. So when will this happen? Irreducible error. It is caused by unknown variables that have direct impact on my dependent variable. Right? To make our model efficient, we are left with reducible error only, right? That we need to optimize it. So irreducible error, no matter what you do, you cannot reduce the error further. Some extent you can reduce the error using various techniques like addressing the overfitting issue, underfitting issue, and doing the feature selection, and probably doing some kind of feature extraction and including the new features in your model. Right? You did everything, but still, you are able to reduce the error some extent only, but still error is there. That is called irreducible error. No matter what algorithm you are going to use it, whether you use it neural network or if you use support vector machine, whatever algorithm you use it, right? Sometimes you will not be able to reduce the error, right? So that is called as irreducible error. Next one is reducible error. What is reducible error, right? The reducible error is nothing but how far off the predicted values are from the actual values, right? How far off the predicted values are from the actual values. With reducible error, we have to, we can optimize the model as much as possible to reduce the error. There are two types of, error components. Two types of, in the reducible error, there are two components. One is bias and other one is variance. So what is bias? We just think bias is nothing but an error. Bias is nothing but an error. How far off a reducible error? How far off the predicted values from the actual values? If the bias is too high, that means the average predictions are far off from the actual values. That is what bias is all about, right? At this moment, you just think bias is an error, okay? Reducible error. Next one is variance. What is variance? Variance is the amount that the estimate of the target function will change if different training data was used. That is what, this one. The contrary to bias, the variance is when the model takes into account the fluctuation in the data, right? That is the noise as well, right? So what happens when our model has a high variance? Now the question is, if I have high variance in my model, what is going to happen, right? So that is what we are going to discuss it in the subsequent slide. And we have something called bias variance trade-off, right? Bias variance trade-off. I discussed about bias. Now I'm talking about variance. Variance, we discussed as part of the descriptive statistics, right? Or the variance, we discussed it. What is the bias variance trade-off? The goal of any supervised machine learning model is to achieve low bias, low variance. That means low error, low variance. Low bias, low variance. To make it very clear, for example, let's say we have linear regression model. Linear regression model. That is what we fitted in the last session. I showed you how to fit the linear regression model. Right? The regression model error. So error, we used mean squared error or root mean squared error. The lesser the error, the better the model. Lesser the error, low bias. Lesser the error, instead of saying lesser the error, I say low bias. Please listen very carefully. Lesser the error means low bias. But low variance should be there. If I run the same model, see, linear regression model, what we are doing is we train the model on the training data set and we have applied on the test data set. Whatever the data is there in this test data set is not exposed to the trained linear regression model, isn't it? This is completely unseen data for this my trained model. When I apply this model on this test data set, I am able to make a prediction. The actual minus predicted is called error. If the error is less, it is fine. That is called low bias. And the variance supposed to be less. Low variance. What do you mean by low variance? Supposing I splitted the data this is my data, sample data or my data set. I splitted this into 75-25% ratio, split ratio. 75% of the data I use to train the model, and then I apply this trained model on this 20% of the unseen test data. Unseen test data. Fine. With this, I could see that with my training and test data, my score, you remember we discussed about score, right? In Python we have something called score. We are able to see the adjusted RSQ somewhat 8 and 9 for the training data set, and test data set 0.85, something like that, isn't it? So if you round it off, 0.86, somewhat closer to the training and test data set R squared or adjusted squared is somewhat closer to these two. That means, right, there is no variance, right? My model is performing well. What do you mean by performing well? My model generalized very well. No matter no matter what kind of test data that you use it, right? Still my model performs well. Right? Supposing, right, let's say training and model generalization. How well my model generalized. See, end of the day, nobody cares which algorithm that you used, right? How did did you do hyperparameter tuning? How much time you spent in fine tuning your hyperparameters, right? How well you have fine tuned your hyperparameter? Nobody cares, right? Irrespective of the algorithm that you have used, irrespective of the tuning you have done it for the hyperparameters, right? The only objective is what the goal objective is how well your model generalized. We don't care which algorithm you used it, right? End of the day, your algorithm should generalize very well. This is what I explained you with the school case, right? How well you are able to understand the concepts very well, right? Are you memorizing it, or are you able to understand the concepts thoroughly? If you are able to understand the concepts thoroughly, it is nothing but model generalization. If I apply my trained model on the test data set also, the accuracy is somewhat closer to my training data set. That means even if I apply my model on the test data set, my accuracy is somewhat closer to my training data set. Very good. Now what happens? Our friend Rishik is challenging me. With this test data set, the accuracy is 0.86. Now I will give you another test data set. You tell me what is the accuracy. Now you apply. Let's Rishik test data, right? He has given me another test data set. He is giving me another test data set. He is telling me apply this model. Okay, now I applied this model. With this unseen data also, if my model's accuracy is somewhat closer, 0.88, 0.88, 0.89, 0.86, it is good. Even with the new new unseen data also, when I apply my model, the accuracy is 0.88. That means my model predicts well. Even if you give n number of unseen data to your model, trained model, the prediction accuracy should be good. It should be consistent. There will be some kind of minor variation, but it should not be something like 0.80. Let's say Prakash gave me another test data set. When I applied this model on this test data set, my model accuracy dropped. That means my model is not consistently performing well. With a different test data set, the accuracy should be good. Right? That is what variance is. There should not be too much of variance. See here, 0.86 somewhat close to 0.9, 0.86, 0.88, 0.87, good. But 0.80, too much of variance. It is too far from this one, training accuracy. Right? So that is what variance is all about. So what do you mean by bias? 0.89. Let's think, instead of using 0.9, right, we use RMSE. When I use RMSE for the training data set, the RMSE is 1.26. When When I use it for the test data, it is 1.25, somewhat closer. But when I applied this model on this data set, if my RMS is 2.85, root means got the error, right? So I discussed about accuracy. This is accuracy, error, right? So remaining is 0.11, 0.89 is the accuracy, explained variation. Remaining 0.11 is error, unexplained variation. 0.86 is the explained variation. The remaining 0.14 is the error, right? So when we take the root mean squared error, see, we need to find out the root mean squared error for the training data also. How do I find out the root mean squared error for the training data set? You need to predict, you need to apply your model on the training data set itself to make a prediction. Now you have the actual and predicted value for the training data set. With that, when you find out the RMSE, you get 1.26. For the test data set, the predicted minus actual, you are getting 1.25, root mean squared error, right? RMSE. That means for the both these model, the error is somewhat closer. We don't see any changes in this error, right? So fine. So that means the error is less error. That means low bias, less error, low bias. Listen very carefully. Less error, low bias, low variances. When I applied this model on various test data set, it comes somewhat closer to 1.26 only. That means that not much variance. That is what standard deviation, right? If you take the square root on the variance, that is nothing but your standard deviation. Hope you understood what is bias, what is variance. So how does it impact my model? If I have the bias in my data set, right, or bias or variance, how does it impact my model? Look here, low bias and low variance, low bias, high variance, high bias, high variance, low variance, high bias, high variance. High bias and high variance. Supposing the bias is very high and the variance also very high, the model will be inconsistent. High error, more error is there and more variance is there. In that case, that model is not at all helpful. You cannot productionize that model. You cannot deploy this model in the production environment. High variance, high bias, high bias, high variance, right? So the model will be inconsistent and also inaccurate on average. High bias and low variance. The model are consistent, but accuracy is average. The error is less error, but the variance is more. If I deploy this model on the production system, and if I give the new specification of the house, and if I ask my model to predict, you cannot expect good accuracy, okay? Next one is low bias and high variance. Low bias, high variance. Low error, but the variance is high. So here high error, but here error is very high, but the variance is less. Even if you give the new data, right, the model is, the consistency is somewhat, it is maintaining it. Suppose the root mean squared error is 1.26. This year you want your model to predict an housing price for the new specification. You are giving the housing size, the square feet of the house and age of the house, everything, okay? Still you are with that, by applying your model on this new data also, your model error is somewhat closer to 1.26. That means the variance is not much. When I apply my model on various new data, the variance is not there. The variation is not too high, but the error is more. Still we are not happy, right? So low bias and high variance. What do you mean by low bias and high variance? Low error, the variance is high. Just because to please my manager, I train my model very well. With that, I am able to increase my adjusted R squared value. Good. But when I deploy the model in the production, and if any new data comes in, the error is not consistent, right? So the error is, sometimes it is less, sometimes very high. So this is also not good. Low bias and low variance, this is the best fit, right? The error should be less, and even if I apply my model on any number of unseen data, the error should not be, there should not be any variance in the error. Rishik, are you able to understand? There should not be any variance in the error, right? It's something like that. You have taken 10 quizzes, 10 quizzes, 10 quizzes, online quizzes you have taken. Of the 10 quizzes, your mistakes, whatever the mistakes you made, right? Consistently the mistakes were 2 and in some case 1.2 and 1 and 1.6 consistently, right? All the errors somewhat closer to 2 only you made it, the errors, right? But the score, let's say 10 quizzes or each quiz you get 10 marks, right? 8 marks are your adjusted R squared. This is your error should be consistent. See here 1.6. Supposing in one quiz or one quiz you made 7 errors. That means what is this? Variance, right? 10 quiz each. See in the when you go see in the Infosys, what is the recruitment criteria? All your exams starting from 10th standard to your highest education, right? All subject it should be 75 and above. 75 and above. If it is less than that, you are not qualified. Similarly, in the 10 quizzes, I conduct 10 quizzes to you. All the quizzes you made only somewhat closer to 2 error only. That means the variance is less. Less variance. Less variance. But the other scenarios, variance is very high. In some test you made 7 error, in some test you made 0 error, some test you made 2 error, and some test you made 7, 8. Variance is very high. Number of errors varying from one quiz to another quiz. The same logic you apply it here. So high bias and high variance is not always good. High bias and low variance is also not good because your model it did not generalize well. Sorry, in this case it is good. The error is more, or instead of this, moderate error, right? If the error is moderate and if the variance is less, then we are good. This model is good, right? We can deploy this model in the production environment. The next one is low bias and high variance. High variance. If any new data comes in, if the model is not predicting well, what is the use? In this case, low, but this is not possible always, right? This only in the ideal world it will happen, but in the real-time scenario we cannot achieve low bias and low variance. Even if the bias is moderate and if the variance is low, then we are all set to deploy the model on the production. We can rely on that model. We can rely on the model. So I can rely on, 10 students, they took 10 quizzes. I have 10 students. Each students, what happened? Not on mute. Am I audible? Someone sent a message. Yeah, Udaya sent a message. I'm not on mute, right? Am I audible? Can someone please confirm that? Okay. Yes, okay. I'm audible, right? Good. Look here. So this is the thing, right? Hope you understood the idea behind this. The same thing for the purpose of Rishik, right? I'm explaining it one more time. So I have 10 students, each students taking up 10 quizzes. I want to select the best person, right? Who scored, very high mark and very less mistakes. In all the 10 quizzes, the error is supposed to be 2 only, so or somewhat closer to 2. All the 10 quizzes, let's say Rishik scored 8. In some quizzes he scored 9 also. The error is just 1 only. But when you look at all these things, the variance is very less. But something like some quizzes 2, 0 and 8 error and 7 error, the variance is very high. This is called variance, right? This is what variance. The low bias and low variance is the preferred one, but we will not be able to achieve this goal given the structure of the data, right? And volume of the data and structure of the data. We cannot achieve this. Instead, we can we'll try to rely on the model which is moderate bias and low variance. That is where the data scientist job is very high, right? You try to reduce the bias as less as possible. If everything is done by model, then why do they need data scientist? So that is where we need to. But first of all, you should be knowing what is bias, what is variance, what is bias variance trade-off. See, that's what the trade-off is. Something like okay, there is an error, but the variance is not much. Variance is not much. In here, right? Moderate error, moderate bias. Still error is there, but when I deploy it in production, it is not making too much of error. The variation is not much. That is what I'm trying to say. So hope you understood these terms: high bias, high variance, low bias, low variance, everything. Okay. So we discussed about underfitting also, in overfitting in the last session also. I don't know how many of you remember this. What is overfitting? Overfitting is the machine learning algorithm performs well on the training data set, but when I apply the model on the test data set, it is not performing well. On the test data set, it is not performing well. That means my model accuracy varies from varies for various unseen data. That is called overfitting. Overfitting a model result in good accuracy for training data set, but poor results on unseen data set. That is what I discussed, right, a while back. That is the problem. This is called overfitting. So tell me now, is this a low bias, high variance, or high bias, high variance, and what kind of category is that falling in? The training data set, it is performing well. That means low bias. The error is very less. That means my prediction accuracy is very good. But when I apply this on the test data set, the error is very high, right? Low bias, high variance. Low bias, high variance. It's overfitting. And underfitting, it is an opposite. Underfitting is often a result of an excessively simple model. Okay, how do I address the overfitting? Let's say I have no overfitting in my model. My model is overfitting it. How do I address it? One simple common sense is, let's say you have 50 independent variables are there. 50 independent variables are there. Right? All the 50 independent variables are not required. You need to find out which all independent variables are helpful in predicting your target variable. Right? By identifying those variables which are helpful, in simple term, identifying the helpful variables in terms of predicting my outcome variable, if you retain those variables alone in your model, right, you can, some extent, you can overcome this overfitting issue. Right? You can address this overfitting issue. Right? You can address the overfitting issue. But when it comes to underfitting, right, excessively simple model, just because I wanted to make my model parsimony, there is a term called parsimony. So this is one of the best practices. If you develop any model, the whole objective is, try to make your model as parsimonious as possible. That means keep your model simple. Don't include so many features. Try to keep the necessary features, the necessary independent variables in your model. Just because I want to address the overfitting issue, if I include more variables, or just because to address the underfitting issue, right, if I reduce the variables, for example, out of the 50 variable, now we are able to reasonably use 21 features, 21 independent variables in my model. Right? Instead of using all the variables blindly, I'm using only 21 features. With that features, I'm able to address the overfitting issue. Sometimes what will happen is, you have included, out of 50 variables, you have included only 10 features in your model. So you thought remaining 40 independent variables are not helpful, useless variable, you removed it. You just kept only 10 variables, 10 independent variables. Because though these 10 variables are having higher predictive power, still to explain my outcome variable, my model requires additional variables. I have to include additional variables. Try to find out the best features which can help explain your dependent variable further. In addition to these 10 features, you need to look at out of these 40 which features are helpful, the most helpful features. Right, after doing some research, right, you are able to find out 5 more features can be helpful. If I include in addition to 10 the 5 new features, it can improve my adjusted R squared, right? It can improve my adjusted R squared. In that case, if you include this, it makes sense, right? So fine, now you did feature selection, and then you, as part of feature selection, you are able to find out the best features which can explain your outcome variable. Fine. If you include less number of variables also can lead to the underfitting issue. But if you include more number of variables than required, see here variables, what I meant by variables is nothing but independent variables. Okay, if I include more independent variables than required, then it is called overfitting. And if I include less number of variables than the required number of variables, that can lead to underfitting. I'll just show you with this example in R. Okay, because R is very easy to understand, very easy to understand all the concepts. Look here, I'll just start with this one. All you need to do is just forget about R or Python. We don't care about R or Python. All we need is adjusted R squared. Then why do I need to worry about the R or Python? Don't say I don't know R and all. Look here, the adjusted R squared 0.876, right? So in this case, I included all the variable. So of these, all the 4 variables, right? Size and variable means independent variable. Okay, size, UDS, Spark, MISC. Rishik, are you able to follow me? Size, UDS, Spark, MISC. For these 4 variables, of these 4 variables, these 2 variables are good, right? Remaining these 2 variables are not significant. As per the, you remember the last session I showed you in Python, okay, I'll go to Python because some people, when I showed you with this, right, Spark, and we understood Spark and MISC independent variables are having a weak relationship with my price, hence including these 2 are not helpful, right? Keep that in mind. The same thing I'm doing it now. See, that's the reason why I included size and UDS here. Size and UDS, right? I did not include Spark and MISC because it has a weak relationship with my dependent variable. Fine. Now I did this. The next step is, okay, so now though these 2 variables are having a strong relationship with my my dependent variable, if I remove one of the strong variable, independent variable, and if I check my adjusted R squared, all you need to just look at 0.64. Look here, this is underfitting. Though size and UDS, both the independent variables are having a strong linear relationship with the dependent variable price, right? If I remove any one of them, still my model explains only 0.64. Size is good, but size can explain only 0.64. If I include UDS, how much I got it here? Okay, here I did not do, right? Let me use UDS here. After including the UDS, see now, these 2 variables together explaining my variance on my dependent variable very well. It's something like if you put 2 good people, the performance is good. These 2 are 2 good people, right? But of the 2 good people, if you put 1%, only 1 good person, obviously the performance is, whatever the best he can do, he could do, right? The same principle is applicable here. But in this case, we've included good people, good person, but we did not include more than one good person. That is called underfitting. If you include only size and if you discard UDS, that means you did not include the sufficient good predictor variable. Sufficient amount of good predictor variable you do not include. That is called underfitting. And we have something called overfitting. This is the simple example. Okay. Dot. What do you mean by dot? Include all the independent variables. Look here. In this case, I did that one. In the OLS, let us go to OLS. Look at LM, right? I included size, UDS, Spark, and MIS. I am going to include MISC also. If I execute this model, and if I view the summary here, it shows 0.893 adjusted R square, 0.896 and 0.893. I included all the variables. Look at adjusted 0.893, isn't it? This is called overfitting, right? Whether these two variables are helpful or not, right? These two variables are helpless or useless variable, still I included in my model. Because of which, where is the error here? Here, the error, standard error, right? The standard errors are, look at this in 0.002, 0.011, right? And if I use only this one, and if I execute this one, right? Look here, earlier 0.93 was coming. By including only the, the sufficient good predictors, your accuracy increased. Your error also somewhat reduced, right? Where is the error? 0.002, 0.010, right? But overall, your adjusted R squared increased. So what is the takeaway here? If you include blindly more number of variables than required, that is called overfitting. And the other way of understanding overfitting is, if your model is performing well on the training data set, and when you apply the same model on the test data set, if the model accuracy is not good, that is also called as overfitting. Okay. Underfitting, if you don't include sufficient amount of good predictors. Look here. So what happens? My R squared value drop. Though I include a good person, my R squared. This is called underfitting. That is called overfitting. Okay. You need to, you are supposed to be diligent in terms of using the predictor variables. You are not supposed to include so many variables. You are not supposed to include many variables than required. If you do so, it can lead to overfitting. If you don't include the sufficient amount of good predictor variable, it can lead to underfitting. 1 second, I'm getting call. Hello. Huh? 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 யார் 4C-யா? 4C தானே? சரி, நான் வரேன், அப்புறம் வரேன். கொரோனா வந்தவங்க வெளியிலே வரக்கூடாது, ஏன் இப்படி பண்ணுறாங்கன்னு தெரியல. Fine. Now you understood what is overfitting and underfitting. So the next one is, now you got a fair amount of idea what is overfitting, underfitting. Okay, and you got some idea of this one. 1 second, let me just check. So now, how do I check if I have the overfitting or underfitting issue in my model? How do I check that one? So for that, we use something called, we do some kind of cross validation. Okay, we do something called cross validation. 1 second, I put cross validation here. Yeah, cross validation is supposed to be here. One second here, I'll just, give me a second, I'll just come back. Okay, there is a confusion. Okay, to overcome or to find out whether we have low variance and low bias, high variance, high bias, high variance. How do I find out? How do I address overfitting issues? Right. So that is when we use something called k-fold cross validation. Right? See, the classic example is, supposing my model predicts satisfactorily on the 25% of the test data set. Okay, my model performing is very well even with the test data. Does that mean my model will perform equally well all the time? I repeat this. See, I splitted my data in 75 and 25 percentage ratio. 75% of the data I used it for training my model. Remaining 25% of test data is there. When I apply my trained model on the remaining 25% of data, which is nothing but the test data, if my model accuracy is on par with training data set accuracy, does that mean my model will perform equally well all the time? That means if I use different data set, for example, Rishi gave me another test data set, and now Prakash challenging me. Now you apply your model on my test data set and tell me whether the training and test data set, my test data set accuracy is same. Right? Just because I tested my model on the test data set and the accuracy is same as my training data set, that doesn't mean my model will perform well on all the unseen data. My model, a good model, should perform equally well on any new data as it did on the training data. If the performance on the new unseen data deteriorates, it is an indication that my model is overfitting. Right? So it is important to rigorously cross-validate the model performance as much as possible. Cross-validate, I use this term. So you need to do rigorous testing, right? So that is where we have something called k-fold cross-validation. We use something called k-fold cross-validation to make sure that my model is performing well on the reasonable amount of unseen data very well. What do you mean by reasonable amount of unseen data? So look here. Let's say the data, let's say my customer gave me 1000 records. 1000 records he gave me. What I do is I split this data into 5 equal parts. I call that as a 5-fold. 1 second. Hello? Huh? நான் அப்புறம் கூப்பிடுறேன்ப்பா மீட்டிங்ல இருக்கேன். Right, so what I do is I split this data into 5 equal parts. Right? 1000 divided by 5 folds. I call this a folds. Instead of saying 5 parts, I call this 5 folds. So fold 1, fold 2, and fold 3, fold 4, fold 5. One second. Yeah. So this is called your fold 1. This is called fold 2, fold 3, fold 4, fold 5. Okay. So if I divide this 100 records by 5 folds, each fold will hold 200 records. Are you able to getting me? Are you getting it? Each fold will have 200, 200, 200 records. 5 into 200, how much? 1000. 1000 observations. Now what happens is, even these 200 observations or 200 records in each fold, right, it is divided by 5, right, 40 of them. That means each and every cell will hold 40, here 40 records, 40 records, 40 records, 40 records, 40 records. So 5 40s are 200. 200 into 5, 1000. What is K? Here this is a parameter, right? The K is nothing but a parameter. It refers to the number of folds that a given data sample is to be split into, right? So this is nothing but the fold. That's the, see, in this case, traditionally or typically we use 10 folds. Instead of using 5, 10 folds. In real time scenario, we use 10 folds. Okay. Since space issue here, I just put only 5 folds here. Okay. This is a 5-fold cross validation. You are doing 5-fold cross validation. So in this case, what happened? 5 folds got created. Right? If I say k is equal to 5, the data set, this data set divided into 5 equal parts. Parts is nothing but 5 equal folds. Right? And my linear regression model will use these 4 cells data as the training data set, and it uses the black colored one as the test data set. See, my customer gave me only 1000 records. 1000 records. And this 1000 record, I need to make sure that how well my model is generalized, right? How my model is generalized, or how well my model generalized. So in the one way out of doing this is I split the data into 75-25% ratio. 75% of the data I train with that 70% of the data, I train my model. Remaining 25% data, I applied my trained model on this one, and then now I am checking the accuracy of both the training and test data set accuracy. Both of them are matching. Look here, that is what I discussed in the last weekend, in the last session. Look here, the training data, just think, let's go by the R squared, okay? The training data R squared adjusted as 90 and test data adjusted R squared is 0.85. So more or less closer, right? More or less closer. But when I apply this model on this test data set, it gives me 0.85. If I apply this model on different test data set also, it was somewhat closer to 0.90. That is what I meant here, okay? So if I test with one test data set, it is not sufficient. But at the same time, I don't have multiple test data set given by my customer. First of all, the number of records given by my customer is very less. He says only this much of data is there. That's all. I cannot give beyond this. We have the limitation here, right? We don't have much data. In that case, what we do is we perform k-fold cross validation. We divide the given data set into 5 equal parts or 10 equal parts, and then what we do is within this each and every fold, right, we use this is your k, right? The k is nothing, k minus 1 folds, right? The k fold, you use it for test data set. Remaining k minus 1 data set are used for your training purpose. These are your training data set. With this you train your model, and then you apply it on this test data set. You hold, this is called, it is also called as hold out data, right? You are holding out this data for testing purpose. Right? In the second fold, what you are doing is, instead of holding this, the first cell as the test data set, in this case, in the second fold, you are telling the algorithm, this is the test data set. You are training the same algorithm. Look here, the same model. Where is your model? Look here. The same model, psi is UDS, the data equal to HDF. Instead of using HDF, you are telling the model to use this as a training data set for the first fold, and then apply this on the test data set. And then dynamically it should take the white colored cells as the training data set for this fold. So my model, the same model will run on 5 different folds, but it will get trained by different training data set, and it will be applied on the different test data set. Hope you understood, right? So this one is the training data set, and this is the test data set. In this case, the 3 white colored and this white color, all the white colored are training data set. The black colored one is the test data set. And here, these two and these two cells data are used for training purpose, and the trained model will get applied on this test data set. The same way, it is the same model but different training and test data set. What is the advantage of this one? Since I did not get multiple test data set from my customer, I have the limitation with respect to the volume of the data or the test data set, right? So what I do is I use the existing 1000 records itself. Every I'm using, right? I'm using the 1000 records itself. I'm creating different training and test data set. It is as simple as that. So now the question is, okay, the same model, you are, say here also you are using the same model. The dependent variable is price, the independent variable is size and UDS. Here also size and UDS, but the training data is differing. Test data set is differing. So by doing so, how do I address the overfitting issue? How do I get to know the overfitting issue? Right? To answer to that, so since you are running the model on each and every fold, right? See, iteration 1 is also called, you are running the first iteration on the fold 1. Sorry, not folder 1, fold 1. This is called fold 2. This is fold 3, fold 4, fold 5. 5 folds are there. Your same model has to run on 5 different folds, and each fold, what is the root mean squared error or mean squared error? The mean squared error for my linear regression model is, just keep that in mind, this one, okay? Right, look here, the same model, but the data is differing, right? So for the same model, data is differing for each and every fold. In this case, what is the mean squared error? Supposing this, the iteration 1, for this fold, the entire fold, the mean squared error is, let's say 2.13, and for this fold, when I run my model with different training and test data, what is the error? 2.07, here 2.00, and here 2.11, here it gives 2.01. You need to take the average of all these things, average of all these values. You will get somewhat closer to 2 point, how much? 2 point, let's say 2 point, let's say 2.08. This is the average of all these means, all these folds mean squared error. Average of all these folds mean error, right? Mean squared error 2.08. This is the mean squared error, right? Average of the mean squared error of all these folds. Similarly, you need to take the standard deviation. Standard deviation of the mean squared error. If you take the standard deviation, right, the variation is not much, right? So 2.13 is closer to this one, somewhat closer. You are getting something like 1.01. The variation is not much. So in this case, you have used only the two variables, size and UDS, right? For example, you are using size and UDS. In this model, you have used size and UDS. See, the column in the independent variable is same across all the folders. Only thing is, the data are differing. See, the model is same for each and every fold. Okay, size and UDS. Supposing you include Park and MISC, and you check this one. If the average error is something like 2.03, error is less, but the standard variation is very high. Supposing you get 2.02, that means that model is not good. This is one way of addressing or identifying and addressing the overfitting issue. Right? So now you understood what is k-fold cross validation. Instead of using, in the real time scenario, we use 10 folds. Instead of 5 folds, we use 10 folds. Okay. Look here, in this Python, how do I implement this in Python? Look here. There is a function, you don't have to write too many lines of code here. See, k-fold cross validation. Here there is a function method called cross validate. Okay, in the cross validate, right, you need to pass the first argument to your model. What is your model name? Your model name is model only. See, this is your model, right? Init.fit is nothing but linear regression model. Okay, the model name, you are passing the model as an argument to your cross validate function. The second argument is independent variables and the dependent variables. X underscore train is holding size and UDS. Y and underscore train is holding price. And we have a parameter called scoring. Scoring is called explained variance. Explained variance will give you the R squared, right? R squared. And CV equal to 10. Create 10 folds. Create 10 folds and use different training and test data set for this independent variable and dependent variable. That's it. And if you use this and if you find out the forget about this, yeah, standard deviation mean for the scores, right? It gives you this one. See, look here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 folds got created. And each fold, what is the R squared? Explain the variance. Right? What is the R squared? And then if I take the standard deviation, see, most of them are somewhat closer, 0.04. The variation is not much, right? And 0.89 is the average. So on an average, we are getting 0.89 R squared, and the variation is not much, right? This is how you need to do it. But the question is, okay, how do I know what kind of variables that I need to include? Supposing I have 50 variables, independent variables are there in my model. Do I need to do cross validation by changing 50 variables, 25 variables? It will take a lot of time, right? So for that, we have something called feature selection technique. Which columns you are supposed to use it? Which all columns you are supposed to discard it from your model? There is a technique called feature selection, using which we can find out which all variables are helpful, which all independent variables are helpful, which all independent, that means which all independent variables we can include in the model. By knowing this, if you include only the relevant independent variables in your model, and if you still you need to do cross validation. So though there is a function available to find out best independent variables or good independent variables. With that, I am going to fit the model. I'm testing with my test data set. The train and test is good. I cannot, just because my model is performing well with one test data set, I cannot decide that my model is the best model. Right? If I have to make sure that if my model is the best model, my model should perform well on majority of the test data set, which is nothing but the unseen data set. That means my model is generalized very well. To make sure that we are using 10 folds. All the 10 folds, if the R squared is somewhat closer to each other, then my model is good, right? The error is also less, the variance also less. Look here, the error is, what do you mean by error here? The explained variance is nothing but adjusted R squared. Remaining 0.11 is unexplained variance. That is error. Right? So 8.9 is somewhat closer to 1. Any value of your adjusted R squared closer to 1 is better the model. And 0.04, there is one fold to another fold, not much of variance. It is nothing but one quiz to another quiz. My mark is, I don't see too much of variation in my mark, almost closer. That is what variance says. Understood? So we need to make sure that with different training data set and different training set, how well my model performs. That is where the k-fold cross validation is helpful. Different types of cross validation techniques are available. Stratified cross validation, and you have something called loose CV. Okay, leave one out variable. Okay, so in that case you are going to use only one record. In that case what will happen, right? You lose CV, out of 1000 records you use only one record for testing purpose. Remaining 999 records you will be using it for training your model. Are you able to concentrate? So what I'm saying is, out of 1000 records, right, you have something called loose CV technique. In the cross validation itself, different types of that. Just a while ago we discussed about k-fold cross validation. The next one is loose CV. Leave one out cross validation. That means out of the 1000 records, one record you use it for test data set, remaining 919 records you use it to train your model. So, right, this model, right, this is iteration 1. In first iteration, you execute your model with this training data set. You train your model with this data set, and then you apply this model on this one data set. In the second iteration, what you do is you same thing, use let's say 998th record and 999th record, use it for testing purpose. For example, here the 1000th record, use it for testing purpose, one record. Okay, here you use 998 records, 998 and 1000, right? These records will be for training your data set. This data you'll be using it for. So here you will be using only one record, right? You will be randomly choosing one record from this 1000 records for the testing purpose, but it is a time taking process. Assume that you have 1 million records are there, and for the 1 million records, if you take one record for testing purpose, it take a lot of time, right? But in the case of Lucivy, you are using each and every record as a training and test data set, but it's a time taking process. Usually what we do is we rely on k-fold cross validation only. We have something called stratified k-fold cross validation. Nested k-fold cross validation is there. At this moment it is too much. I don't discuss too much on this one. Okay, hope you understood the purpose of k-fold cross validation. Okay, for model selection we use k-fold cross validation. To address the overfitting also we use k-fold cross validation. Okay, the k-fold cross validation very common. Even in the case of ridge regression or lasso regression or any type of algorithm, we use cross validation only. We use cross validation also. Okay, k-fold cross validation. Fine. What are the next things? Yeah, next one is the interesting part. Okay, See, in the last session, last Saturday and Monday, I discussed about how to fit the linear regression model in Python, and in R today we'll see how to fit a model. Very simple one. Once you know one language, learning other languages very much helpful. And also in your biodata you can specify multiple skill sets. The chances of shortlisting your profile is very high. Okay, now in the last session, how to implement the model, how to validate the regression model assumptions, we discussed it. Now what we are doing is we are going to look at something called unusual and influential data. Unusual and influential data. In addition to checking the metrics like adjusted R squared, F statistic, P value of each and every independent variable, and also the RMSE error metrics, mean squared error, right? And validating the regression model assumption. One more diagnostic you need to do it in order to improve your model performance. Okay, in order to improve your model performance, you need to perform one more diagnostics. Okay, now we know what is outlier, right? Whenever you are trying to fit a line over data points, what do you mean by line? This, I'm talking about the linear regression model. This is my model. This is called your best fit line or regression line, right? Regression line. Okay, whenever you try to fit this line over data points, you can come across either an influential point or an outlier. Now I mentioned about something called influential point, influential point or outlier point and outlier point. Sometimes, right, the combination of both also you can find it. If the model is underestimating the dependent variable, then it will be indicated by positive residual. My model is underestimating the dependent variable. For example, my housing price is 10. My predicted value, this is actual, and my predicted value is 9. Underestimating the predicted value, right? Underestimating this response value or dependent variable, then it will be indicated by positive residual. So actual minus predicted, right? That is what your error or residual 1, positive value. On the other hand, if the model is overestimating the response value, then it will be indicated by negative residual. Supposing the price is 10, but my model overestimated 10 minus 11 is minus 1. That is what I meant. If the model is underestimating the response value, then it will be indicated by positive residual. On the other hand, if the model is overestimating the response variable or value, it will be indicated by negative residual, right? So now we know what is outliers, right? The observations that diverge in a big way from the overall pattern. That is called our outlier. It could have an extreme x value compared to other data points. It could have an extreme y value compared to other data points. Fine. The outliers, have right. So supposing the y variable have extreme values, it is also called an outlier. Sometimes both the x and y values also you will find some kind of extreme values. See, in the dependent variable also you can find extreme values. Independent variables also you can find some extreme values. That is called outlier. Sometimes you will find the extreme values only in the independent variables and vice versa, right? So now I'm going to introduce a new term called influential points. What do you mean by influence? Influence can be thought of as the product of leverage. At this point, forget about leverage, okay? Outlierness, okay? Removing the observation substantially changes the estimate of coefficients. Removing the observation, that means removing the outlier. If I remove an outlier from my data, will that changes my coefficient value, the estimated coefficient value? What do you mean by estimate of coefficients? Which is nothing but my beta naught plus the beta 1. These are the coefficients, right? Into size plus beta 2 into UDS. These are all called my coefficients, right? The beta naught, beta 1, beta, these are all called my coefficients. And this is intercept, these are the slopes. This beta 1 is size slope and beta 2 is UDS slope. By removing one specific day record which has an outlier in it, right? Let's say I have 1000 observations. Of the 1000 observations, one record has outlier. If I remove this outlier and if that changes the value for the intercept and slope, right, that is called, in that situation we call this outlier as an influential point. Now let us look at this data set. Supposing I plotted both x and y data sets here. These are the data points. I plotted it here in the scatter plot. This is called scatter plot. We plotted two numerical variables in the scatter plot. So, but here I could see that this data point is far away from these data points. Only this one. Rishik, you remember I discussed about outlier, right? This is outlier. And linear regression is sensitive to outlier. Remember this, sensitive, right? But if I don't have this point, the line will be drawn here because this line is covering almost all the data points. Just because I have one outlier, this line got moved to here. Instead of here, right? It got moved because it has to cover this data and remaining data set. Since this line got shifted from here to here, the intercept is getting changed, the slope also getting changed. This ends I call as an influential data point because of this outlier, my fit, the straight line itself got dragged downwards. Hence the intercept and slope got changed. Hence I call this an influential point. This point I call the influential point. If I remove this outlier is an influential point. If I remove this my model will fit here very well, right? I don't have any outlier. It is good. My model is good now. That is what I highlighted here. Okay. So instead of having an outlier here, let's say in this case I have an outlier here. Do you think is this going to have any influence on my fit? Yes, obviously, right? This line will get dragged in the upward direction. Obviously the slope and everything will get changed. Now let us look at this data here. all the data sets, all the data are very close to each other except this one. Can I say this is an outlier? Yes, it is an outlier. But does this outlier has any influence on the line? Will it move up or move down this regression line just because I have an outlier here? No, right? Since you have an outlier, this line will get extended. Though you have an outlier, this outlier is not an influential point. It's not an influential point. Now you understood what is influential point, what is non-influential point. We are talking about outlier. Outlier, the presence of outlier can be there, but the presence of outlier should not be an influential point. If it is an influential point, if your outlier is an influential point, then you need to remove your outlier. At this moment, you just think this way. Okay. If that outlier is not an influential point, like this, though I have an outlier, but this is not moving up or down this line. Right? If you leave it as it is, the line might go little above, right? It is going to touch this one. So hence, this is not an influential point, but we have an outlier. So in this case, you tell me, the data point is here, right? The outlier is here, but I don't say it is an outlier, right? It is not, either sitting here or here or here, right? It is somewhat closer to this one only. Let's say I have another blue color here. It is somewhat closer only, right? This is not an outlier. Is this an outlier? No. But is this an influential point? Yes, it is an influential point. Though it is not an outlier, because of this, right? The line slightly will get shifted here. The line will get shifted somewhere here, right? Because to cover this one also. So earlier we saw outlier was there, but it was not an influential outlier. But in this case, we don't see an outlier, but still this data point, this data point is considered as an influential point. Now, so this I have a point, the outlier here, right? So is this an outlier? Yes. Is this an influential point? Yes, it is an outlier, and also it is an influential point. Hope you understood, right? What is an outlier? What is an influential point? So not all the outliers are influential point. Not all the influential points are outliers. You need to keep that in mind. So as per the definition, an influential point is one if you remove it from the data would significantly change the fate. Right? That's what I mentioned here. After removing this, I'll remove the fit. This is the fit. Right? If the fit changes significantly, then we call that data point as influential data point. An influential point may either be an outlier or have large leverage or both, but it will tend to have at least one of those properties. We use something called Cook distance. This is the measure. We use it commonly to find out the influential point in our data set, and also it helps us to measure the effect of deleting a given observation. With influential outlier, what is the performance? Without the influential outlier, what is the performance? For that, we use something called Cook distance. So what is Cook distance? It measures how much a point influences the regression coefficient. That is what Cook distance. In R, we have a package called Cooks.distance. In Python also, you have something like influence_point. Okay, that is available on function, using Cook distance in simple term. If I fit a model with and without the influential outlier, how much would my model change? That we can find out with the help of Cook distance. In the interview, they will ask you, you don't have to know the formula. You don't have to find out manually the Cook distance. There is a function available. There is a library. In this library, this function is called Cook distance. Within this, you specify your model name. It gives you the variables that are the observations that are influential. Okay, but in the interview they will ask you what is the formula. This is the formula for finding the Cook distance, yj minus yji. So predicted y minus predicted yji whole square divided by predict p into the is nothing but number of independent variables, okay, into MSE, mean squared error, mean squared error. So what is the difference between these two? Fitted response when all the observations are included, a fitted response where the fit does not include observation, right? So after removing the outlier, influential outlier, what is the performance with the outlier? What is the performance, influential outlier, right? You need to put MSE values for this one, the predicted value, okay, and then divided by p into mean squared error. This is the di will give you the Cook distance. Now all of you please give me an answer for this. In the context of regression analysis, which of the following statements are true? When the data set includes an influential point, the data set is non-linear. Can we say that it is non-linear? What do you mean by non-linear? Non-linear is something like this. This is called non-linear. Linear is this one. We are fitting the straight line. But here in the case of non-linear, it will be like this. But even in the case of linear regression, we found some influential point. If you have an influential point, that doesn't mean your data set is non-linear, right? Hence, it is wrong. Influential point always reduces the coefficient of determination. Always, you need to look at, is this true? Is this true? No, right? Not always. All outliers are influential. This is not true, right? This is not all outliers. That's why I explained all the scenarios. Some outliers are influential, some outliers are not influential, right? So the answer is none of the above. Right? Now you understood what is influential data point, what is Cook distance, all these terms now you understood, and also you understood the k-fold cross validation and bias variance, right? You understood what is overfitting, underfitting, all those things now you understood. How do you deal with the overfitting issue? That is when we will be using k-fold cross validation. We need to check the average of the 10 folds mean squared error or root mean squared error or adjusted R squared, and then you check for the standard deviation with different features or different model. What is by including two independent variables, what is the average mean squared error for all the folds, and what is standard deviation, and removing those useless independent variables by retaining only two good independent variables in your model. What is the average mean squared error for all the folds, and what is the standard deviation for all the folds? That's all, right? By looking at it, okay, you can draw conclusion. Okay, with this we are able to conclude, even though I apply my model any unseen data, I don't see too much of variation, and the error is also moderate or less. Now we are good to go with deploying this model in the production environment. Rishik, don't worry, we will have a separate session for how to deploy the model in the production. Okay, I will demonstrate in the later session. With that you will be able to understand. That is very important. Hope you understood. So what we will do is, with this I'm going to stop it today. Tomorrow I will start the logistic regression model, and also tomorrow I will explain you the assignment so that you can start work on the assignment. Only when you work on the assignment you will be able to understand the concepts thoroughly, but don't disregard and don't postpone it. Any questions? Because if I cover logistic regression now, you will be overwhelmed. Let's go step by step, right? Anyhow, tomorrow I will start the classification algorithm, which is nothing but logistic regression. Okay, many algorithms are available as part of logistic regression. Usually we start with logistic regression. It's because it is simple to understand. But don't miss out any sessions, okay? All right, since I don't see any questions, we will circle back tomorrow same time. All right. In the meanwhile, you please watch my videos. Okay, all the linear regression so far, whatever I covered as part of linear regression, please watch it without fail. Okay. Good night. Take care. Have a good day.